And let me also just remind you of the latest figures from the UN Human Rights Office. They say today that after almost 1 year of war in Ukraine, verified civilian deaths stand at more than 8,000, with more than 13,000 injured. But they warn that because of the difficulties of getting information from some areas, the real figure will be much higher. We will continue to bring you lots of analysis of what President Putin has had to say and all the other main news of the day here at BBC News. Thanks for watching.
You're live with Geeta Guru-Murthy on BBC World News. Russian President Vladimir Putin delivers his State of the Nation address, laying out his vision of the war. He blamed the West for the conflict, accusing it of trying to turn Ukraine into an anti-Russian state, and said the existence of his nation was at stake.
I want to repeat. It were them who are guilty, who are culpable for the war. And we are using our force to stop it.
After his historic visit to Kiev, President Biden arrives in Warsaw to meet European leaders. 2 weeks after being struck by catastrophic earthquakes, Turkey is hit by another deadly tremor. In the next half an hour, we'll be live in Kiev and Warsaw. Hello, thanks for joining us. Almost 1 year on since invading Ukraine, President Putin has spoken out against the West, blaming them for provoking and escalating the war, saying the US and its allies seek limitless power. In his State of the Nation speech, he sought to justify what he calls the special operation and said the very existence of Russia was at stake. James Waterhouse, thanks very much indeed. Well, you're live with Geeta Guru-Murthy. Still to come, we'll be live in Poland as President Biden visits after his surprise trip to Ukraine. He is due to make a speech himself today. We are told that White House officials will have, of course, been listening to the Putin address and potentially adjust Biden's remarks coming up later today. More on that in a few moments. You're live with me, Geeta Guru-Murthy. Now, as we've been reporting, following his surprise visit to Kiev, the US President Joe Biden is in Poland today, a country that has emerged as one of Ukraine's strongest allies. Many in Poland see the war as a real threat, a feeling that shapes their response. This from Sarah Rainsford. Anna Foster there in southern Turkey. I'm on Twitter at Geeta Guru-Murthy, back in 30 minutes with much more on all our top stories in a momentous week, of course, for news. Thanks for being with us. You're live with Geeta Guru-Murthy on BBC World News. Vladimir Putin uses his State of the Nation speech to justify his invasion of Ukraine. He says the very existence of Russia is under threat, with the West to blame, and promises no end to the invasion.
It were them who are culpable for the war. We are using force to stop it.
Mr. Putin says his forces are fighting to liberate Russian territory. We'll analyse what he had to say and what it signals as the first anniversary of the invasion looms. And a day of speeches. President Biden is also due to make an address in Warsaw after his surprise visit to Kiev in a show of support for Ukraine. As the leaders talk, the fighting continues. We have a special report from our correspondent on the front line near the city of Bakhmut.
The target is Russian forces in their trenches about 2 kilometres away. Day after day and night after night, Ukrainian forces here are battling to hold Bakhmut.
And in other news, another powerful earthquake hits Turkey and Syria in areas already devastated, bringing more death to the region. In the next half an hour, we'll hear from our correspondents in Kiev and Warsaw and be live in Turkey and Moscow. Hello, we start in Moscow, where President Putin has used his State of the Nation speech to justify the invasion of Ukraine, accusing the West of wanting to see the end of Russia. It comes as Russia's foreign ministry says it has summoned the United States' ambassador of what it calls Washington's increasingly aggressive course. Moscow accuses America of widening its involvement in the Ukraine conflict. Vladimir Putin made his latest remarks in a lengthy address to MPs and military leaders just days before the first anniversary of the invasion. The Russian president blamed Ukraine's allies for provoking the conflict and escalating it, and for supplying weapons to Kiev. He vowed to continue with the war, accusing the West of turning the conflict into a global confrontation. While the Russian president was particularly critical of the United States and the NATO alliance. Here's a clip. Vitaly Shevchenko for now. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. I'm on Twitter at Geeta Guru-Murthy, but we're back in a few minutes for much more. Stay with us. You're live with Geeta Guru-Murthy on BBC World News. Vladimir Putin uses his State of the Nation speech to justify his invasion of Ukraine. He says the very existence of Russia is under threat, with the West to blame.
It were them who are culpable for the war. We are using force to stop it.
Mr. Putin says his forces are fighting to liberate Russian territory. We'll analyse what he had to say and what it signals as the first anniversary of the invasion looms. With President Biden visiting Poland, we'll report on how that country is shoring up its own border defences as the war in Ukraine rages. Also ahead, warnings across Eastern Africa as Cyclone Freddy approaches, bringing powerful winds and torrential rain. And we'll report on the 4-day working week experiment. What effects did it have on staff and the companies that employ them? In the next half an hour, we'll be live in Madagascar and hear from our correspondent in Poland. Hello. President Putin has given a fiercely anti-Western State of the Nation address seeking to justify his invasion of Ukraine 1 year on. He said Moscow would continue protecting people in what he called historically Russian lands. Mr. Putin also said Russia was suspending, though not ending, its participation in the new START nuclear arms treaty. Kiev accused Mr. Putin of living in a different reality. Speaking about the war in Ukraine, Mr. Putin focused on the Donbass region. Take a listen. Let's move on to Madagascar because the authorities there have closed schools and restricted movement ahead of the arrival of Cyclone Freddy on Tuesday. The National Disaster Management Office has sent tents, ropes, chainsaws and other supplies to those eastern districts most likely to be affected. Well, the storm caused minor damage to the island of Mauritius on Monday, flooding beachside hotels. We will try and get more on that in a few moments. But we're going to take a quick break and we'll bring you much more on all our news here at BBC World. Stay with us. You're live with me, Geeta, Guru-Murthy. Now, scientists in the US say they have used new technology to restore movement in the arms and hands of two people who'd suffered strokes. The team in Pittsburgh were able to stimulate the spinal cords by implanting electrodes in the neck. Dr. Marco Capogrosso, one of the main researchers, explained how the treatment works. David Riddell, thank you very much indeed. It's a fascinating study, more online. I just want to show you some pictures as we leave of an alligator which was found in New York, in Brooklyn. Have a look at these images because it's a 120 centimetre long reptile. We can't find you the pictures, they've gone. But anyway, have a look at those. They are on the website. Amazing, in Prospect Park, a park I know well in Brooklyn. Extraordinary find.
Hello. A major winter storm is going to impact much of North America over the next 3 days.